Hey everyone, it's Jake Clark and John Schneider from Fargo 3D Printing, episode 8 of our podcast. Today we're going to be talking about helper discs, which I've alluded to since I think podcast 1 or 2.
Yep.
So I keep saying we're going to do it in the next one, so we're going to cover it today. And then we're also going to cover the Z18 a little bit, as we actually have one in the other room printing. So we just printed something, so I'll get back to that. So it's going to be kind of a quick and short one today. Helper discs. So what helper discs do is when you're printing something, so let's say this is my print bed. My iPad is my print bed, and I'm going to print something like this building set. Well, what happens is PLA, ABS, either one of them, what'll happen is when you get out here towards the edge, it's likely to curl and warp just a little bit because the plastic wants to go back to the center of the mass, so it's going to try and pull back to the middle. And what MakerBot had a while back was helper discs, and we've brought them back. They're on Thingiverse. We'll throw a link in there for you guys to go see. We have a small one and then we have a large one. The small one is actually about the size of a quarter, and the large one is about the size of a $half, $half dollar, somewhere in there. So what it is try and get a piece here. So pretend this is our helper disc. So we're printing this piece. What a helper disc does is when you print a raft, what happens is you put this helper disc kind of out here on the edge, just so that it's not touching the part, but almost touching the part. So when you have it out here close to the edge, what will happen with the raft is the raft will actually come around, it'll mesh into the helper disc's raft and come back out. So what's going to happen is you're going to increase that surface area of the raft so that if there is any curling, it's going to happen out here on the helper disc versus on your part.
Right.
So it really helps with that adhesion part of it. So like I said, we have those out there. We'll probably be having a video at some point going a little bit more in depth about them. But it works for ABS or PLA. We've used them, Rep 2, Rep 2X.
Well, pretty much every printer, because
gen.
almost any desktop printer is going to run into warping issues at some point in time. And it's amazing how such a simple disc, I mean, that's really all it is. It is about the size of a quarter. It's about the thickness of a quarter.
Too.
It's just a really simple cylinder, but it can make all the difference in how much your prints end up warping. So, I mean, something that's that simple, it's easy to use. You just need to put it at the four corners of your model, and it won't avoid warping altogether, but it'll focus the warping more on where the helper discs are at instead of having it hit the corners of your model. Yeah,
and I mean we've used. Sometimes you'll have to use a helper disc and then a couple other helper discs outside of that just to help with curling, because sometimes you'll get a giant mass of plastic. Let's say you're doing a box at 100% infill. Well, if you have more helper discs outside of those helper discs, then
helper discs on helper discs,
and they're helping everybody.
Yeah.
So I know I did one circular part where it looked like a flower when I was done because I had all these helper discs, and it also helps with support. So for instance, I don't know if this is hollow. This is perfect. So let's say we're doing a cylinder and this is hollow on the inside, and for some reason there's a support going from the base all the way to the top when we're printing it like this. Well, sometimes what will happen is if you don't need a raft for any reason, what you can do is you can actually put a helper disc in the center to hold that support down. Because I was running into an issue with one of my prints that I was doing was I had a cylinder probably about the size of a small coffee can. I didn't need any supports, or I didn't need any rafts, but in the middle I had to have 3 supports running down. And what was happening was the supports were actually peeling up, and if I did a raft, it would actually ruin the part for whatever reason I was running into. It was about a year ago now. And so what I did was I turned off the raft, I put a helper disc in the center, and what happened was that support bit into the helper disc and actually stayed secure to the platform, so I didn't need to try and finagle or move my part or orientate it differently. So it's another bonus of the helper disc. And like I said, we have it out there on Thingiverse. We have 2 of them. So yeah, they really do help.
Very appropriately named. Yeah, whoever came up with the name for them, well, good job. Good job on that. So the Z18 is the other thing. So we literally just unboxed this thing today. So we've had maybe a grand total of an hour's worth of hands-on time, including setting it up. So we've already gotten our first test print off. Very first thing we did with the Z18, and it's very important that with any new MakerBot machine now, that you do this right away is updating the firmware. So MakerBot came out with a new version of its desktop software and firmware for the machines last week, and so we're starting to see some improvements in print quality. From what we've heard, that this most recent update is really only showing a small glimpse into slicing improvements, so print quality improvements. The next release that they're going to have, which from what MakerBot says is supposed to be sometime this month, so maybe in the next 2 to 3 weeks, that will improve slicing performance quite a bit, I think, in the actual speed of the slicing as well as the overall quality of the slicing. So one of the things that they're running into is a slight mismatch from the directions on how much, or the code that tells the extruder how much plastic to extrude is having a mismatch between the code that's telling the gantry where to position it. So there's some print quality issues that MakerBot's aware of. So when that new firmware comes out, when the new software comes out, that should improve things quite a bit. Another really nice thing is that the MakerBot desktop software is going to start auto-updating. So instead of having to install it and reinstall the software every single time, now when there's an update, it'll let you know that there's been an update, but it really keeps the software evergreen, so you always have the most current version, which as many people who have 5th gen MakerBot printers know, having the most recent software update can make all the difference in having a good printing experience and having a not so good 3D printing experience.
Definitely, I'm looking forward to that, because then get our 5th gen working a little bit more than it's been doing. So the one print we got right now, we did the nut and bolt sample print. I mean, the surface finish is really nice on it. We'll get a close up on this. There's one part on the bottom here with the M that's a little finicky, but I mean overall and we're printing with the Smart Extruder. Keep that in mind. Overall, it's just a really nice first print.
Yeah. And we have another print that's just starting right now. It's actually a slicing torture test, so it'll be a much better indicator of the print quality that we can expect from the Z18. So we'll know a little bit more about that. We might be able to get some footage of that after this, when all the post-processing goes on, getting some footage of the finished print from that slicing test. So I don't know. We'll see what it ends up turning out like.
Yeah, hopefully. I got high hopes. After seeing that, I got really high hopes on this.
Well, and I mean, quite frankly, just comparing build quality differences between the Z18 and the 5th gen, the Z18, it seems like they put some extra fit and finish and just general polish into that. Even, I know the 5th gen has some issues with the body resonating a little bit with when the motors are going. Mm-hmm. The Z18 is it's more solid.
And I mean, they I think they realize that because they actually have some foam sitting on the inside of it, mm-hmm. To kind of dampen that. I mean, it's a really nice looking machine, really nice. The inside's nice and shiny, aluminum or something along those lines. It also has in the back right corner, it actually has something where the nozzle will actually clean itself. And unlike
so very similar to Stratasys machines. And even the Cube Pro. So the Cube Pro has a wiper that will wipe the nozzle in between color changes or when it starts a new print, just to make sure that there's no gunk that gets on there. Because sometimes there's oozing from the extruder and the drilling. It can gunk stuff up.
Yeah, and the nice thing is that they use a brush versus some of the other ones. They use an actual pad, which like a plastic pad, which is weird.
It's almost like
not a metal brush.
No.
But it's...
Well, yeah. So I mean that works, but on the Cube Pro, it's almost more like a not Teflon, but the type of material that a plastic spatula would be made out of. It's not rubber, but it's a softer plastic. And then on the Z18, like you said,
it's a brush.
It's a brush,
and it's nice because that plastic can wear out over time on the other ones.
Well, and I'm sure eventually the brush would wear out too.
Yeah,
but I mean, it's just one of those things that it'll wear out eventually.
But yeah, I mean, today's gonna be a really short podcast. We got some things that we're doing in the next couple weeks, getting prepared to go down to another trade show, which maybe we'll cover that next week. Got some things going on with our 3D printing week going on, but we got some cool. I don't know if you can see this, but we got our own Fargo 3D printing T-shirts, and on the back, I got Clark with a J to the 1, right?
I think that's the first power. Yeah.
So all of our employees have these T-shirts. So Different ones have different numbers at what rate we hired them. Not rate, but at when we hired them. 1, 2, or 3. So I'm the first one. John's 2. Then so on and so forth. So maybe next year at this time, maybe we'll have number 30 or 40.
Yeah, we'll have to see.
T-shirt, but so yeah, that's kind of what I got.
Yeah. Next week's podcast, we'll be able to wrap up and kind of talk about how 3D printing week went. So by the time that this video is, by the time this podcast is published, 3D printing week will be done. But then next week's we'll be able to cover a little more in depth how the week went. So just really trying to get that 3D printing community built up a bit more. Meet with anyone who's really involved in 3D printing, whether it's on the hobbyist level or whether they work with the big industrial commercial machines. It's always nice to find out what other people are doing with it.
And I think we might actually start hosting a 3D printing meetup.
Something that's a little more regular. So like every month. We're not set on a date yet. We'll have a little bit more info on that in the coming weeks, and we'll be talking about that on our different social media channels too. So if you're not already, definitely like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, subscribe to us on YouTube. And we're also on Instagram now as well. So we are Fargo 3D Printing on Instagram. So follow us there too. And on behalf of Jake and I, thanks for watching.
Thanks.
Bye.
Check out my crib.